Coming up on the podcast, we're going to be talking about a new era for Arsenal Football Club, what I've been playing and watching recently, and also talking about the delay for Shenmue 3. Stay tuned, coming up very shortly. Hello and welcome to another edition of the TGS podcast with your host, the Gabriel Sin. Let's get right into the first topic, which is going to be talking about Arsenal Football Club and the fact that there's been a lot going on since I last talked about the club on my channel. And Wenger has gone, we've got a new manager, and a lot of things seem to be changing for the positive. And it's very much sort of an exciting but also really nervous time for the club because there's a lot of rebuilding that needs to be done, particularly in the team itself and also just generally at the club in terms of confidence and motivation. While I respect Wenger for what he did with the club, it's quite clear that he struggled for a long time. The first sort of 10 years or so of his reign were fantastic, and we've got those memories of the doubles, the invincible season, getting to the Champions League final, things like that will always stay in our memory, and I'll always be thankful for him for being a part of that. But like I say, the club has been in a downward spiral for a long time, and the fact that now we've had 2 seasons in a row outside of the Champions League is a huge thing for this club because it was something we were so used to. It happened for like 20 seasons in a row, and then all of a sudden it's gone, and it's a huge loss. Not only just not being able to compete in the biggest club tournament, but also on a business side of things, it makes things very difficult trying to attract those top players that we desperately need for our team. Now, we have actually made a signing. We've signed Stefan Lichtsteiner at the time of recording this, and he's a right back formerly of Juventus, very experienced and on a free, which I'm quite happy with personally because at right back, Bellerin has had no competition, and the fact that now he's got someone there who could potentially take his place might actually push him to perform better than how he has for the last couple of seasons, because for me, he hasn't pushed on and he's not developed like I thought he might do. There's no debating the fact that he's super quick, but he doesn't really do anything with that pace. He doesn't really have good technique. He can't cross for shit, and he's just not a very good modern defender. He just doesn't work that way. So I hope that someone like Lichtsteiner, who's been there and done it at right back, will be able to show him exactly, like, this is how you defend, this is how you track back, but also when we need a bit more support in attack, this is how you help your teammates. And it can only be a good thing for the club, because if Bellerin starts playing bad, then Lichtsteiner can jump in and he can do the job, and then there's a little bit of competition for places. And I think that's the problem with Arsenal as well. There's not been enough competition for places, and players have just been getting in on the fact that, well, you're basically the best of the worst, essentially. Other areas that we need to, of course, sort out are, of course, the goalkeeper. Now, Cech has actually been handed the number 1 shirt for next season, which suggests that he's going to be the number 1 keeper. But for me, I personally think he's past it, and I, at best, would say he's a substitute keeper. He's not at the level as what he used to be, and it almost seems like we got Cech on the point where he'd hit his peak with Chelsea, and then when we signed him, he just started to deteriorate massively. Now, it's not all his fault as well. The defenders in front of him have not made it easy at times, and that again is another area that we need to sort out. 2 quality centre-backs are desperately needed. We are heavily linked with Socrates from Dortmund, who, from what I hear, is a sort of kind of an old-school, old-fashioned centre-back who's just no-nonsense, really strong, and just makes a nuisance of himself. And that sounds exactly like the sort of centre-back we need. As for the other centre-back, I really don't know what we could go for at the minute. Koscielny's out with an injury, and he's honestly struggled since probably the last sort of 2 years, really, with injuries, and it's affected his form and everything. And for me, at the age of 32, 33, with this 8-month injury, he's done, basically. There's very little chance that he'll play for us again. Mustafi, we actually tried to sell last summer, and we didn't get rid of him. So it's quite clear what Arsenal internally think of Mustafi. And for me, he's made too many mistakes this season, and he has to be shipped out. Left back, I'm relatively happy with. Monreal has probably been the one defender who I would say, despite his age, he's been fantastic. He's actually scored, I think, like 6 goals this season, which for a left back is really uncommon, in my opinion, anyway. So he's been generally pretty good. He has had a few ropey games, but generally really solid. So left back, we're pretty good. Then you go on to the defensive midfield area, which is an area we haven't fixed since Vieira left. We haven't had that commanding midfielder who can block the attacks but also create opportunities going forward as well. I mean, to be fair, it's very difficult to replace a player of Vieira's quality. He was basically, in my opinion, one of the best midfielders I think the Premier League's ever seen. He could basically do it all. He had the strength to defend, and he had the ability to drive forward and actually create chances and score goals himself. So it's going to be difficult to find someone to replace that, but for me, the main thing is protecting that defence. We need someone who can do the dirty work, and he's happy to do that dirty work. The likes of someone like a Kante would be the perfect player. For me, he's one of the best midfielders in his position on the planet. He's so difficult to get away from, and he's constantly running. The guy's got superb energy and stamina, and he just makes it really difficult for anybody going forward. But he's also developed his attacking side of things as well. His passing's improved since he's been at Chelsea, and he's just a more well-rounded midfielder. For me, though, it's primarily that strong defensive midfielder. I don't necessarily expect him to be Messi-esque in terms of attack and be able to score shit tons of goals and everything like that. But he needs to be able to do that dirty work and stop that attack, and then be able to pass the ball onto the attackers so they can do that attacking portion of the game. So we've been linked with quite a few different ones at the minute. Steven Nzonzi seems to be the one which keeps cropping up, and I've not personally seen a lot of him, so I can't really say a lot, but Emery himself worked with him, and if he rates him highly, then I'd say give him a go. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? Xhaka is not really a defensive midfielder. He's too slow, and he's almost just more like a standard midfielder who has the ability to spray passes about. He's not really defensive, he's not really attacking, he just sort of sits in the middle. And while I don't necessarily think we need to sell Xhaka, I don't think he is the actual option, the best option, should I say, for defensive midfield, should I say, for us. So there's a lot of work to do in terms of just the squad. Then you've got the players that are currently there. Who will Emery want to get rid of? Because there are obvious candidates to get rid of. Cech, Mustafi, also players like some people might disagree with me with this, but I personally think Wilshire's time is up, and I think we should just let him go. Then you've also got people like Danny Welbeck, who, while at times can be quite effective and seems to do really well for England for some reason, he's just not really the top quality when you compare him to the likes of Aubameyang and Lacazette. He's just not remotely on their level in terms of an out-and-out goal scorer. So there's lots of other things to think about there in terms of what he's going to do with the squad. So it's a really sort of exciting time, like I say, for the team, and God knows what the starting 11 is going to look like come the start of the season. We could end up with maybe 3 or 4 different players in the team, which for me would be a nice, refreshing thing to see. But overall, I think going forward for the season, my personal hope and expectation is that come the end of the season, we'll be back in that Champions League spot again. That for me is a step forward. We can't be getting overexcited and thinking that we're just suddenly going to jump from 6th place to challenging for the Premier League. It's not a realistic option. So for me, progress would be getting back into that Champions League, possibly winning a cup if possible, and moving, and then the next step after that would be then challenging for the Premier League, winning cup competitions, starting that building that winning mentality again that we used to have. And yeah, like I say, I'm really looking forward to seeing what the summer brings in terms of players coming in and out and sort of new things happening. I'm really looking forward to the season itself starting and seeing how we kick things off, because traditionally we're pretty rubbish at the start of the season. So it's going to be interesting to see how Emery's possibly changed their tactics, their style of play, and hopefully we can hit the ground running and make a real go of things and turn what was arguably one of the worst seasons last season into a distant memory, essentially. So anyway, on to what I've been playing and watching recently. So in terms of what I've been playing, I have actually been playing the Mega Drive Classics edition that came out on the current systems, PS4, Xbox One and everything. I've got it on PS4 myself. And yeah, really been enjoying playing some old Mega Drive classics like Streets of Rage 2, one of my favourite games of all time. You've got Sonic on there, all sorts of different games. Just great to be able to just put that in, play it for a little bit, and then just go and do something else, basically. It's a real awesome pick up and play experience, and yeah, thoroughly enjoying playing through those games. There are also some games on there that I have never played before, so I'm looking forward to trying those out as well. In terms of what I've been watching recently, I've not really watched any sort of movies that much, really. It's more been YouTube and things like that I've been watching, and just general TV. The last film that I can remember watching since the last podcast is Dawn of the Dead, which of course is a classic George A. Romero zombie movie and one of the best of its genre, really. There's not really a lot I have to say about that. It's just one of those fun movies that's well worth watching. I tell you one thing though, I haven't watched the follow-up, Day of the Dead. A lot of people talk really highly about Day of the Dead. It's been a long time since I watched that, so maybe I'll have to track that down and give that a watch soon. On to the last little topic, and that is going to be Shenmue 3 being delayed. Now, this was announced probably about a month ago now, but basically Shenmue 3 has now been delayed to 2019, and we don't know when exactly. Now, as someone who backed this on Kickstarter a long time ago, it's really frustrating, but at the same time, having seen some pictures that they did recently where they showed some in-game characters and the graphics of the game from one stage of development to the next, it's quite clear that they have made improvements in the time, so there is progress being made. And for me, while I'm a little bit disappointed that it's getting delayed again, and it does start to make me think, is this ever actually going to come out? At the same time, if they continue making the progress that I've seen from some of the pictures and the images, I'm happy to wait that longer if it means that we're going to get a higher quality game as a result of it. So yeah, it's a little bit of a downer, but we do have Shenmue 1 and 2 coming out as a HD bundle on PS4 and everything like that at some point this year. So of course, can always just play through those while we wait, and then hopefully by the time we get around to sort of finishing those two games, Shenmue 3 will have arrived finally, and we'll be able to dig our teeth into that. So yeah, fingers crossed it's not too late into 2019, because like I say, I've been waiting a long time for this, and I backed it on the Kickstarter, and I paid for a physical copy, and yeah, I'm still waiting on it. So that wait has been ridiculously long, but hopefully it's coming to an end soon. Early 2019, Sega. Please, early 2019. Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this podcast. A little bit shorter than what I was expecting it to be, but that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Thank you very much for listening on SoundCloud or watching on YouTube. This has been your host, The Gabriel Sin. I will catch you next time.